Well, here's a novel idea, a really novel idea. Since the ongoing renovations to the Parliament buildings in Ottawa are causing a massive upheaval and will continue to cause a massive upheaval, why not take Parliament on the road? That's right, since MPs and senators are or will be scattered all over downtown Ottawa for the next several years here while the Parliament buildings get a $5 billion multi-year makeover. Hey, why not take the national political process to the people outside of Ottawa, right across Canada? A traveling question period coming to your province. The Hill Reno includes the House of Commons, so a temporary chamber will have to be constructed. So if MPs are moving out, why not have them move way out to the various parts of Canada over the next decade and actually have the federal parliament sit for a year at a time in different provinces? This is the idea of David Mitchell. He's the president of the Public Policy Forum. I spoke with him about his proposal to bring federal politics closer to the people and maybe even federal politicians closer together. David Mitchell, first of all, good to see you again. Interesting proposal you're putting forward here. Let's start with where you got the idea for this.
Well, you know, it's not an entirely original idea, Peter, because if you go way back in our history, way back to before Confederation, in Canada, our Parliament moved around from Toronto to Montreal to Kingston, and ultimately Ottawa became the permanent seat of government. But I actually think if you go way back in time, democracy was more vibrant when Parliament moved around. Why not take advantage of the fact that our Parliament buildings, these classic Gothic structures that are iconic images of Canada, they need to be repaired. Why not give them the tender, loving restoration they require? Take as long as necessary. Take a few years, take 10 years to do it, and let's have Parliament hit the road.
Now, you're going way back in history. We don't have to, we still have to go way back in history, but there, you know, those who studied sort of the history of this place know that we had a major fire in 1916, and Parliament actually operated for 4 years in an Ottawa museum. So, the process, if I can put it that way, Parliament has left Parliament Hill before, so it's not completely unique.
Yeah. In fact, those years that you're talking about, Peter, was during the First World War, and the fire in the centre block made members of Parliament and senators leave. They moved into what was then the new Victoria Memorial Museum, and of course the big joke in Ottawa at the time is the politicians are going where they belong with those fossils in the museum. But the truth is, during those 4 years that Parliament met off Parliament Hill, the place was very dynamic. That's when women first had got the right to vote in our country. They passed some interesting legislation. By being out of the House, out of the rut that they were in, they actually took some fresh approaches to public policy.
Yeah, I mean, and you've written a lot about this and talked a lot about this, and I think you and I have talked about it before. A lot of people believe that the process is in a rut in this country again, but let's drill down into your proposal a little bit. Exactly how it would work, you know, how would it work? You're talking over 10 years, and where would Parliament move to in those 10 years?
Right. So what I'm proposing, and I think this would take some planning, but it could be planned on an annual basis for our Parliament to meet in a different province every year for up to 10 years. Maybe if we include the North, maybe with some flexibility, even a little longer. And the notion would be, imagine, taking Parliament, not just a parliamentary committee on the road, but the whole Parliament to meet in, let's say, Alberta, or in Quebec, or in Newfoundland. For a whole year, Parliament would meet in a different province. I actually think this would get some of our crankiness and our cranky Parliament out of its rut by getting out and getting to know the country. Not only that, think of the impact it would have on our politicians who have to travel from across the country, trudge across the country from different time zones to Ottawa every year, the same way. Imagine if you were a British Columbia Member of Parliament, and for the year that Parliament was meeting in BC, you could actually be closer to home, maybe even sleep in your own bed most nights. That's a luxury right now only Central Canadian MPs have. It would actually shake things up in a positive way.
Tell me more about, I mean, sure, fewer, less distance depending on where Parliament would move to across the country, but so in all 10 provinces, and in the North as well, but how do you think it would change the conversation that Canadians are currently treated or subjected to on Parliament Hill by having parliamentarians move away from what we call that bubble in Ottawa?
There's a famous quote from Winston Churchill that he is quoted after the Palace of Westminster was reopened when it was fixed up from the bombing it experienced during the Second World War. He said, "We shape our houses and they shape us." If you take these 308 MPs from the chamber that they sit in right now, 2 sword lengths apart, confrontational, polarized, where they're comfortable, but maybe a little too comfortable in the rut of the bubble they live in here in Ottawa. Take them out, and you know there are a lot of buildings, beautiful structures right across our country that can accommodate 308 people sitting down to have a meeting. Maybe not always 2 sword lengths apart. Maybe they're sitting in a circle. Maybe they're sitting in a different configuration. But planning this 1 year in advance for each province to host Parliament, not necessarily in the provincial capitals, but in a major community, I actually think this could have a transformative effect on our democracy. It might prompt politicians to think a little bit differently about their country. And mischievously, let me say this, imagine Parliament meeting in Quebec for a year, what impact that might have in, say, the province of Quebec. Turn that around. Imagine having all members of Parliament, including the Bloc Québécois members, required to sit for a year in British Columbia or Saskatchewan. This could be an exercise in actually nation building and discovering the great variety of our country.
Yeah, great ideas are often hobbled by, tremendous logistical problems, and I think you'll admit that this has some, but not insurmountable, you're telling me, but things like the tens of thousands of people in the public service here who support a parliament that is in Ottawa. So all the members, 308 members, let's say, are sitting in British Columbia for a year. What happens to all that support staff? How do they actually do the business of the nation?
I actually think this is one of the most exciting parts of this concept, Peter, because, of course, Ottawa would remain the seat of government, the home of important national institutions like the public service, the Supreme Court, etc. Parliament only sits for about half the year. In fact, the statistics over the last few years is it's sitting less and less, much less than half the year. Maybe it could even be a little bit more efficient if it was meeting in different locations. This idea would have been more difficult a generation or 2 or 3 ago. But with technology today, there's no reason why this can't happen even with support staff still being here in Ottawa. We don't have to take the whole apparatus on the road. We need to take Parliament and parliamentarians on the road.
Okay, what kind of feedback are you getting to your idea?
Well, I'm finding people in different regions of the country love this idea. They think it really would shake things up in our politics, maybe force politicians to work together in some different ways on regional issues. It would allow regions to highlight their issues to members of Parliament during the year that Parliament was sitting in their provinces. I'm finding the greatest resistance, and you won't be surprised at this, Peter, right here in Ottawa, where people say, well, this could never happen because change doesn't happen here. And that's another reason why this should happen, in my opinion.
Well, it's an interesting proposal, David Mitchell. Thanks for coming in to speak with me about it.
A pleasure, Peter.